Art Live. Good evening, I'm Sean Alayo. I am recording this interview on behalf of the Newham Heritage Centre. I'm with
the Franklin Amadi.
And today we're going to be discussing Canning Town Library, Rathbone Market and regeneration in the area. So, Franklin, thank you for taking this time to be with me. First question.
No worries, it's a pleasure.
First question I'm going to ask you is, well, it's not really a question, but could you tell me about your history of Canning Town and that library?
So my history of Canning Town. So I was born in 1990, and by then my family lived in the western end of Keir Hardy Estate in a place called Spark Terrace. Although I always knew where that library was, in truth, I rarely used it because when I was 7, my family had moved to Custom House. Although, when I was born, no one had internet. By the time I got to 20, everyone had internet at home. So there was a period in my teens where I did used to use the libraries a lot, particularly to use the computers, browse the internet, but not Canning Town Library because it wasn't in a convenient location by that point in my life.
Okay, so tell me more about what you know about Canning Town and your growing up around there.
So, that's a broad question. Do you want to narrow that? How best to answer that question?
Not really. You can. It's an open question. I'll give you wide room.
So I mean, the Canning Town I knew was a place of great change, particularly the part of Canning Town where I grew. Well, a part of my growing up was. It was, I guess, the changing of hands almost in a way. From where I lived, there was 4 pubs, all within a stone's throw. Now, I know you've got to be like David with David's slingshot to be throwing stones that far, but there were a lot of pubs, let's say, and the businesses in the area reflected the needs of the community. And I guess the community who lived there before needed a lot more pubs than we have today. And there still is, the Rathbone Market. And it's a bit sad in a way. Like, as an adult, I very rarely use markets, but by then I think we had more of a culture of browsing. Because there was no internet, you needed to physically visit shops to know what they actually had to sell. And I did enjoy, I got some fond memories of going around Rathbone Market with my parents, particularly my dad. He liked the deal, let's say. And, back then the big supermarket was Quick Save, and I was a big fan of their broken biscuits. Lots of good memories in that area. In my youth, despite the fact I went to St. Luke's Primary, which is Church of England, we were Catholics. So we used to attend St. Margaret's. And then on moving to Custom House, we started attending St. Anne's. St. Margaret's Church with good old Father John, who left for some years. He's back there now. But yeah, growing up, Canning Town was it was an interesting place because it still, at least from the outside, appears to be a hub of hard workers, working class people, businesses to cater to those people. But as time has gone by, the cultural mix within the neighbourhood has shifted dramatically. And I think to myself, at the bottom of Barking Road, there used to be a newsagent. Well, not the bottom like Quick Save or where Co-op is now, but like, well, anyway, towards the bottom, because obviously the top end is in East Ham. There used to be a newsagent called John Bennett's, and my dad used to treat that place like it was, if anyone will have it, it'll be there. If it's not there, it doesn't exist. And just on the other side of the road to that, there used to be it's still there, a fish and chip shop. And like, I remember we would visit those places. But the thing is, the way in which we use space, the development of towns has changed so much. Canning Town used to have banks, plural. The last one was the Abbey National, which is now obviously Santander. And for a very long time, the cash machines at that Santander, even though the branch was physically closed. And as time has gone by, like the business to replace John Bennett's, it's great in a way. I can get plantain and yam there if I was still living locally. But yeah, trying to think to myself about like the times going through Canning Town. Obviously, things have changed a lot. When I was born, Canning Town only had the Silverlink Metro. So yeah, you could get a train, whatever it was, once an hour or maybe twice an hour to Richmond. But you look at Canning Town today, and there's just so many additional services. Obviously, the Jubilee line, the Elizabeth line will stop there, the DLR. So Canning Town, almost in its own right, is a transportation hub. I would answer that question.
That was a
I don't
brilliant
want to
answer.
waffle off too much.
That was a brilliant answer. Thank you very much. Now the next question. So expanding on what you said about Canning Town being a hub. So if I was to ask you to describe Canning Town's heritage in maybe 10 words, what would you say to me?
10's an odd number, man.
I know, so let's do more than 10. Go even further.
In a sentence, and maybe the sentence will have more or less, a little bit more, a little bit less than 10. It's explain its heritage, and this is a question I should have been thinking about beforehand. I always think of Canning Town's working class roots providing the transformations that we're seeing today in Canning Town. Some of the places, although now thinking about it, those places probably count as Silvertown. No. Some of the places that we're seeing being built up in Canning Town, this was ex-industrial, and if those places were already residential, maybe there wouldn't have been the opportunity to. Then again, that's a lie, because the place I used to live in, Canning Town, actually was demolished, and they've rebuilt it. It's where the Morrison is right now. So I guess 10 words describe its heritage. I'd say, hard working, dynamic. Yeah, very dynamic. That's a tough question. Yeah, I give it some thought. Maybe later on I can come back and give it a better answer.
That's fine. Those were good answers anyway. So then the next question along that train of thought is, how do you see Canning Town's regeneration benefiting the people that are presently there and were previously there?
Regeneration is always a very tricky one. It's always a very tricky one. I think that, and I have to put this in quotation marks, for the people who can still afford to be there, it must be tremendous, because they now have greater diversity of housing stock in Canning Town. The people who have businesses have much more customers. The people who need to get up and about places, they too have a lot more options. Like I mentioned earlier, before, Canning Town just had the Silverlink. So a journey like Canning Town to London Bridge, which takes just under 20 minutes. Imagine trying to do that with no Jubilee line. In fact, imagine trying to do a journey like Canning Town to North Greenwich with no Jubilee line. It's like, for those who can afford to stay in Canning Town, it must be amazing. The the diversity of businesses, just up that Barking Road, you've got your Turkish places, your Portuguese places, and interestingly, and also quite nice for me to see, there's quite a few Nigerian places, and when I think to myself about it before, that was an odd location for a McDonald's, but maybe they always knew Canning Town was going to become like this. It's it's different, but it's still really good. I think the only thing that's lost in terms of Canning Town's heritage is there used to be so many more pubs, and I know as a healthcare professional that generally speaking alcohol's bad, but it is a part of the. It was, I should say, a part of the area, and if the last time you were here was say year 2000, you'll be shocked at where all the pubs have gone. Actually, all the pubs means they're all shut. They're not all shut, but where majority of the pubs have gone.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. I see what you mean. So, expand more on the effects of pubs on the social life in Canning Town.
So the thing is, the world was completely different back then. But if you think about there being two economies, a daytime and a nighttime economy, right now, Canning Town, there's like an ice cream parlor, a pizzeria. There's places where you can, go for a date. But back in those days, most businesses had closed for the evening, apart from the takeaways and the drinking establishments. So today, there's a different kind of evening activity. I do wonder where the game originates from, but there was a pub, it was called Ordnance, and I remember I used to play pool in there, and I don't think.
Sorry, Frank, the line broke up a bit there. Could you repeat what you just said, please?
I said that there used to be a pub around the corner from the Key Cutters. I think it was called the Ordnance, and I used to play pool in there. And I don't think, although there's lots of restaurants, etc., I don't think there's anything quite like a place to play pool. Actually, tell a lie, the Beckton Arms might have a pool table, but I've never been in there. Pubs. You see, the thing is with pubs is they offer a certain informality, unstructured evening activity. Nobody goes into a restaurant, stays for 20 minutes, leaves, and then comes back for half an hour. Whereas pubs, particularly if you were having to meet multiple friends and everything, you could do it in a way that was less coordinated. And I guess in those days it made sense because you didn't always have mobile phones.
True. So the next question is, do you think that the disappearance of pubs is a sign of any kind of change in what Canning Town's heritage will be?
Yes, but the change happened first on a legislative level. So I can't go through all of them off the top of head, but, within the community, you hear of the rumours. Did some pubs close down because of complaints of noise pollution? It seems so. Did some pubs close down because the business model of not serving any food or anything, just liquid only, became untenable? Potentially. But there's also the rumours that some establishments closed down due to violence, which feels a bit sad, really, that the license holder has to close their establishment for things that may not have been within their control. But I think to myself, Canning Town South Working Men's Club is probably the outlier in that I think that they were sold to developers. But But yeah.
Okay. Okay. Now I'm gonna circle back on something you were hinting at before about the affording of living in Canning Town. What do you think? In fact, let me rephrase this. What made Canning Town affordable, and do you think it will be affordable for the working class in the future?
I mean, I don't know all of the economic circumstances that made Canning Town affordable back in the day. I lived on a council estate in a council flat, and properties that are maintained by the states, the local governments, are always far below market value for private rented accommodation. However, when I look at the prices of 1 and 2 bedroom apartments in Canning Town, it's far out of my own price range. And I mean, I'm still a member of the working class, but yeah, a skilled professional, and I would struggle to buy there. I definitely won't be able to get the size of property I have outside of London. Trying to purchase in Canning Town. I don't think future generations of the working class have any prospect of buying any property in Canning Town or anywhere in the E16 area. To be honest with you, that's not really the fault of the local government. It's something that has been going on for progressive governments, and yeah, it is a tough situation. It's a tough situation that if you're there and you're growing up there, the prospect that you may never be able to afford there without a substantial inheritance from your parents, yeah, it is quite tough.
Okay, could you expand a little bit more on how that will affect the kind of people that will be in Canning Town in the future?
Pardon me. I mean, the truth is, I know some people or some commentators are deeply concerned with gentrification, and to some extent, it will happen on some level. But the first affected by or the first signs of people who are not working class, people who are skilled professionals moving into the area, would affect first the new housing. So those who are already established in their own council property are inclined to stay there for life. And the way in which council properties work, unless there's a change in legislation coming up, is that one has one for life, and the direct descendants can inherit it from them and from them and forever on. So the existing population should remain firm, should remain stable. If you're in the private rented sector, and you know, I'm going to make a grand assumption here, there's a good chance that you need to reside in good proximity to where you earn. So even though those people may find that there's cheaper rents on the edges of London, for them it makes more sense to stay closer to the action, closer to where they work, where their friends are, where they study, all of that kind of stuff. So the profile of Canning Town, you see, when I was growing up, and up until today, to be honest, Canning Town wasn't always seen as a desirable place. But in a very weird way, the first time I noticed that Canning Town had changed in the, I guess, mindset, the opinions of outsiders, was, I don't know if this is still the case, but when Canning Town was rebanded to be a Zone 2/3 station, And I know for some people that they don't even bother looking at Zone 3. Zone 3 is out of London. But becoming a Zone 2/3 station, that put us in the same bracket as Canary Wharf. That put us in the same bracket as, Elephant, no, Elephant Zone 1. But, like Lambeth, we got the recognition that we are that close to the centre of the city. And I guess for people whose work that is quite important to, they also would gravitate towards Canning Town. But something I must add, there is a lot of apartments, and a lot of them are 1 and 2 bedroom. Whereas when I lived in Canning Town, although there were still flats, and I guess today they would be considered apartments, there seemed to be, I don't know if this is statistically true, more family-sized houses. So I think the profile of person who enters Canning Town will also be younger, because 1 and 2 bedroom properties appeal more so to people who are younger and have smaller family sizes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously it can be retirees. If you want to retire to Canning Town, I guess there's no reason why not. But yeah, generally speaking, younger starting families as opposed to established families.
Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, so with that then, so if you were to say, in fact, no, again, it's a bit difficult to word these questions, but I'll ask you a very vague question and then I'll leave it open to you. What do you think the future of Canning Town looks like in terms of the average person that lives and works in Canning Town?
Yeah, that is a very vague question. I mean, definitely the reputation of Canning Town will eventually become more professional. But you see, the thing with Canning Town is that the high incomes needed to live there, I imagine, would not also be able to work there. I mean, in my head, I almost think of it as a bit like overspill from Canary Wharf. Because when you look at the value of the property, if you have the income to afford this property, you may not be working in Canning Town. In fact, you're probably not working in Canning Town. So Canning Town's not going to immediately have a reputation as being a place where well-to-do live, because they still work elsewhere. And for all intents and purposes, those people may just sleep in Canning Town, but continue everything else of their life outside of Canning Town. There's also Canning Town's an interesting place. It's not just a place that surrounds Barking Road. I was quite surprised to see that the job centre on Freemasons Road is actually in Canning Town. So when people think of Canning Town, they naturally would think of the strip of Barking Road leading up to Canning Town Station. But Canning Town as an area is much larger and includes a lot more areas that haven't seen a new tower block. So the average person, or the perception of the average person, may come to change in time, although the genuine average person may not move as quickly.
Okay, so with that said, how do you think that will affect the heritage of Canning Town in the future, essentially? Because as you said previously, Canning Town didn't have the best of reputations. So how do you think the changes that are happening now will affect what comes out of the heritage of Canning Town in the future?
In a weird way, I don't see it necessarily affecting the future heritage of Canning Town, in the sense that Canning Town, it's been a long time since Canning Town has been a town supported by one or two big employers. A long, long time. Canning Town in the 1990s was a community defined by many small businesses, and it still is. So I think to myself that, if we were talking about Custom House, for example, it'll be a different conversation because some things have come to other parts of E16 that have and will change the. For Canning Town, I think that definitely it has to be a more open community because it's on the tube line, and we all know what having a train station in your town, a train station on the tube line can do. Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how Canning Town seeks to, I guess, in some ways, represent itself as time goes by. Yeah, I would answer that question.
Oh, it was a brilliant answer. So, to wrap this oral history interview up, I'm going to ask you one more question. So, the thesis for my report is as follows. How can Newham's past and present combine to preserve its history and foster a positive future for its residents? What would your answer to that question be?
Yeah, do you know what? I do think that as best possible that there needs to be better education about the area, because you see the something that I find quite interesting is a lot of people don't know this, but our postcodes in East London are alphabetical. So E1 is Aldgate, and E2 is Bethnal, E3 is Bow, E4 is. Do you know what E4 is?
No.
Chingford.
Oh,
E4
yeah.
It's Clapton.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what E6 is? You should know what E6 is. Come on, man. You grew up around here. E6 is East Ham. But it's one of those things whereby when you think about it,
E7 is Forest Gate, isn't it?
You could go E7's Forest Gate. What's E8? Hackney.
Yeah.
E9, Homerton.
Yeah.
E10, Leighton. E11, Leighton Stone. E12, Manor Park. So it's alphabetical, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And that is not a random thing. But why is Canning Town E16? Why isn't it E3 or E4?
Tell me.
And if you deep the history of it, Canning Town in itself was a new town. The older part of the town, why we are 16, is because of Silvertown. So for those people who like to think to themselves, Canning Town was always this way, always that way, if you do your history, you would realise that actually Canning Town was a newer plantation, let's say. And it has grown and grown and grown. But those with short memories may perceive that it was always one way, when actually it was very much a collection of residences on the very western edge of Essex. And Canning Town was a frontier, because what separates us from Tower Hamlets is the River Lee, and that's what separated Essex from Middlesex. So if people understand the history, that Canning Town was not always one way or another, that it was a really small place once upon a time. So even the Canning Town that people may think of in the 70s and 80s, it wasn't like that in the 1870s and the 1880s, you know. It wasn't always like a monocultural place with, a particular kind of person or a particular kind of worker. It's constantly been growing and reinventing itself over a very long period of time. So I always think that the way to unite the past and the future is through education. You can't understand where you're going if you didn't understand where you came from. And to know what Canning Town used to be is not even in my lifetime, not in yours, not in our parents. You know, we're going back a much further way.
Mm-hmm.
And if we go back to even just Newham being incorporated into Greater London, even if we went back to that time and looked at that canning town to today, you know, it's constantly been growing and changing. But in essence, that working heartbeat hasn't really changed. I mean, I don't know because I don't live there anymore. Correct me if I'm wrong, that it is predominantly blue collar businesses within that area, and and also at the same time, it's like there's lots and lots of restaurants, but let's not joke about it, no one's going to win a Michelin star anytime soon, you know. So it's one of those things whereby it's a working class area with not the same businesses that were there when I was a child, but the same essence is there, you know. So in some ways, people may see the change, but quintessentially, it is somewhat the same place. And actually, probably something to add is that the block where I used to live and the buildings around it, to somebody, those were the new builds. And in the same way how we look at this lot as the new builds, some other day they won't be the new builds and something else will be the new builds. And the thing is, you know, when you think about how Camden Town was back in the day when it was just considered like, you know, the other side of the River Lee, like even the houses that were there but are not there anymore, they were once upon a time someone else's new builds. So it's you know, never really stops.
Okay, I'm with you. So, you know, there's one more thing I'm going to ask you just because you prompted me. Now, do you remember the old Camden Town Library?
I do.
It's being changed into a heritage centre. And that's going to happen very, very soon. So, with that, I'm asking all of the people that I can find and interview to give me a little bit of an idea as to what they would like to see that heritage centre do or put on, or how you would like to see the heritage centre inform the local residents as to what Camden Town is all about. Do you have any ideas?
Not off top of head. But one thing that I think is really, really, really important is that the building, as much as possible, is preserved as it is, or as it was, let's say. I always thought, because the old library was next to Community Links, or was it the other way around? Community Links was next to the old library. I always thought it was bizarre, such a grand building. I wonder now I even wonder in my head, did that used to be like a town hall or something? Like, very grand building. So the first thing first is it's good that it's kept in public ownership. I don't want to talk too much, but there's the place where I live now, the council do not own one of the community assets, and the owners of it were happy to keep it as it was until it no longer worked for them financially. So they're trying their best to repurpose it. And it's one of those things whereby if Newham was to let that slip into private ownership, for the next 10, 15, 20, who knows how many years, until somebody says, I want something else from that place. So I guess the first thing first is making sure that it remains within the public realm. In time they'll find the right things to put on it. Because imagine the other way around. Imagine you have killer ideas of what you're going to do in the Heritage Centre, but you sold the Heritage Centre. You know, so long as we have it, in time, better thinkers than myself would come up with a schedule of things to be there. But I guess one thing I can say is what I don't want to be there, and sometimes you get this overplaying to, I guess, overrepresent certain history or histories even. So I think so long as whatever's put on there is authentic, then it should be good. You can't please everybody, but So long as history doesn't become revisionist, you know. I think I'll leave the answer there.
Right, Mr. Amadi, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah.
Yeah, much appreciated. I will speak to you again soon.